guys. So I'm here with my brother Carlos and Dr. Hemal Patel, who's the professor of the University of California in San Diego and chief scientific officer of Verséa Discovery, which offers the first and only complete personalized test of our mitochondrial biology. So today we'll be discussing what's the importance of mitochondria, why should we be testing for it, and any other details that Dr. Hemal Patel will add about its importance. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Hemal Patel.
Yeah, great to see you, Miguel and Carlos. It's been great. I'm glad we got to run your test a few weeks ago. We can talk about that in a few seconds. So why study mitochondria? So mitochondria are in every cell of your body except your red blood cells, right? So they really are a sensor for how we adapt and take in the environment that we're exposed to and all the stressors that we have. And the reason I call them sensors is because they make energy, right? And energy is what flows through us and allows us to sleep, move, act, think, do all the things that we want to do. And one of the things that everyone tries to tweak in order to get healthy is their energy balance. People feel exhausted, tired, in pain. All of these things involve aspects of mitochondrial biology. Mitochondria were sort of thought of initially as these powerhouses of the cell, that they make a lot of energy, and that's what they do. And there is a big component of that. They make all of the energy, but they do something really important in addition to that. They are the gatekeepers for cell death and survival. And so this now gets into what your clients are interested in: living well, longer, and in a much more healthy state, right? And so this is really a balance and a battle you're constantly facing in every one of your organs of cell death and survival. And how do you survive in a more resilient way? And it's to make your mitochondria better, not only as these energy powerhouses, but also in their signaling capacity and their ability to move and morph and dynamically adapt to the environmental stressors that we're constantly exposed to. And these environmental stressors are huge, right? They're internal, the way we think, the way we act, the way we behave, but they're external as well. The sun you're exposed to, the screaming and yelling, the dude who just, cut you off on the highway, the anger that you create, all of the air you breathe, right? Miami air, I don't know how toxic it is. San Diego air is pretty good. And so different cities have different environmental toxins that you're breathing in as well. Our bodies are constantly bombarded by these stressors, and mitochondria are the sensors that allow us to adapt to this. And so the problem that's existed in this space is everyone wants to tweak their mitochondria to their optimal state. And we'll go and ask people, well, how do you know your mitochondria are working and they're behaving like they should? And the typical response is, well, I feel better. I'm like, well, it's bullshit, right? There's got to be more to this than just feeling better. There has to be a way to measure what those things are doing. So my lab's been doing this for 20 plus years. We've been trying to figure out ways to measure mitochondrial function. We have all the crazy, amazing tools in the lab to be able to do this. And about a couple of years ago, we started thinking about how to commercialize this into the human space and the consumer space. How could we give the general guy walking on the street or the elite athlete that's trying to improve their health, improve their performance in competition settings, or improve their recovery from injury? How do we give them information about their mitochondria at a high level that we can do in the laboratory? So let me share this slide that sort of expresses where we were at.
So wait, Doc, if we
Go
understood you correctly, stress,
Yeah.
environmental toxins, infections, viruses, aging, that's what's one of the hallmarks of aging. I mean, I've heard you're as young as your mitochondria.
Right.
And excessive working out, sleep deprivation, all these things are playing a role in your mitochondria, is what I understood.
They are. And one of the things is we don't have a battery in our body. We can't store energy, right? So we have to constantly make energy, and your mitochondria are constantly making energy. As soon as they make energy, it's consumed and it's used, right? So they have to function for your entire lifetime. And so if you can't create a furnace that's making energy all the time and it becomes inefficient, that energy can't be stored, and so you don't have it, right? And so this is a calculus that your body's constantly challenged with for its entire lifespan. And
And,
there's,
if I may add, Doug, I think the
yeah,
value to the consumer, first of all, thank you for your work because it's awesome. But we've been in the space for a really long time. One of our two sort of cornerstones are, hey, environmental toxicity is a humongous factor, and nutritional deficiencies, meaning food is no longer enough, is also a huge factor. And
yes.
so, we've been in the in the optimization space for a long time, and there's so many companies that will push mitochondrial function products, right?
Yep.
And optimization products. And then there's the NMNs of the world and the NADA plus and all this stuff, injectable, oral, patches. I
Yeah.
mean, we've tried them all. We've tested them, the ones that are legitimate. So we've spent thousands and thousands of dollars testing this stuff, but like you said, nobody's able to tell you what it's
Yeah.
actually, what's the health of your mitochondria.
True. And I was talking to a provider yesterday. He said, "Give me a soundbite of how you describe this test." And so, the way I described it to him is, this is the first bullshit detector that's been produced for mitochondria, right? It will tell you if what you're doing is optimizing your mitochondria, or if it's not. And it really gives the power to the person who's taking thousands of dollars of supplements and they're really wreaking havoc on their body to do this. This will tell you if what you're doing is actually working, right? So the way we developed it, the gold standard has always been muscle biopsy, but who wants to go in and get their leg numbed up, a needle shoved into their leg to pull out the muscle to measure that functionality? It's painful, compliance is low, and you have to pay people to do it. They're not going to pay you to do the test on them. And the scalability sucks. You could do maybe 2 or 3 a day in our laboratory. It's amazing for research studies, but you can't do it at scale. The next iteration of this was blood draw. So we were involved in the NASA twin study, and the challenge that NASA posed is, we can only give you blood samples. Can you invent a test that measures mitochondrial function? And so the thought I had was, the blood captures your environment. It's a manifestation of the genetics that you have, and that genetics creates an environment, right? It has metabolites, it has exosomes, it's got proteins, all of these things are floating around in your blood, and your blood is what's been seen by every one of your cells, and so it's capturing information from all of those sources. The thought was that then is you in a nutshell, right? It's your environment that you create internally. We transfer that environment onto living cells that were sitting on our assay, and we can now predict. So we don't have the guy's brain cells, we don't have the guy's lung tissue, we don't have his heart, but we can make cells that represent each of those organs, and now we put his blood onto those cells, and we can predict how those organs in his body are responding to that environment. So now this gives us a way to look at a new window of biology by just capturing blood. Scalability is still an issue. You have to go to LabCorp and all these places to get the blood drawn. It has to come to our facility frozen, and we have to do the assays. Where Verséa Discovery and MeScreen, our first product, is taken off is this idea of a blood card. So you drop a few drops of blood into this first window. The window wicks away the serum into the second window. It dries. It's stable at room temperature. You can ship this card to us. It's stable out to 2 months. We then reanimate that serum, and that 2 month window gives us access to the whole world, right? You could literally collect this sample anywhere in the world and get it to us, and we can run the assay. We
Wow.
pop that serum out of there, we reanimate that, and we do essentially the NASA assay. We adopt your environment onto a living cell, and we measure all aspects of your mitochondrial biology. We've been able to show that this correlates. So if you take muscle cells, actual muscle from an animal, and compare it to blood from that same animal, it's a really, really high correlation that we see in these
Yeah.
values, right? So this
Yeah.
suggests that the test really validates this to this. So now you don't have to go in for the painful biopsy. You just put a couple drops of blood on this card, and we can give you all this information about your biology. And the uniqueness of this test is it gives you huge insights into the stress response that you have. So the first part of the test looks at how your mitochondria are stressed. And so now that we have you captured on this card and we can transfer you onto the cell, we can really beat the crap out of this cell and see how your environment adapts or misadapts that cell. So we'll give you a stress-related mitochondrial assessment. The next phase of the test then looks at your energy profile. One of the big things that I see sort of imbalanced in individuals is their fuel states. They're not sleeping well, they're not eating well, and so they don't feed their body and they don't have the raw resources that their mitochondria need to make energy. And so we see if you're using energy in an efficient way using mitochondrial glycolysis, which is the less efficient way to make energy in your cell systems. But you need both of those furnaces to make energy in unique situations. And the second level test measures that aspect is, are you doing these efficiently? Then the question becomes, is there a dysfunction, right? So one of the big pressures that we've as an organism and as an entity on planet Earth have had to deal with, as soon as organisms move from water to land, the biggest pressure they had to adapt to was oxygen in the environment. Oxygen is critical to life, right? If you're in a hypoxic environment, you die. If you stop breathing, you die. If your heart can't get oxygen to your cells, you die. So it is critical to life. It's also detrimental to life. If you can't handle oxygen in your furnace, and the mitochondria is the major furnace, there's two products that you get. If you use it the correct way, you get water and energy at the end of that rainbow, right? If you use it the wrong way, you get free radicals and no energy at the end of the day. And so our test evaluates whether you're making free radicals or not in this process. And we can stress the mitochondria and tell you, right, is your furnace making energy or is it making free radicals? And that's an important thing to see. And then the final component is the dynamic feature of this. So mitochondria are social organisms. They like to be connected to each other. As I mentioned, right, they're sensors. Why are they sensors? They're old bacteria that got incorporated into our cells. And so they react to the gut microbiome, which people think is really your primary brain. If you're going to think about what communicates with what, the gut's probably communicating with our mitochondria through the blood and the environment that they create. And so the mitochondria like to be connected to each other so they can learn, sense, and resolve information, right? So in every chronic disease, when you look under an electron microscope at 10,000x magnification and you look at what mitochondria look like, they're no longer connected, they're disjointed, and they balloon up and they look horrible. And they create a lot of dysfunction and a lot of disease, right? They create free radicals, they no longer make energy, and they no longer have a buddy that they're interacting with that tells them how to adapt. And so our final component of this test looks at that connectivity and how connected and disconnected mitochondria are.
So
And
that's
so when
funny.
you
It actually sounds like when they become, they want a network, but when they become disjointed, it's almost like they become a senescent cell almost.
yeah, it's
They
like
wreak havoc over their environment.
imagine you as an individual, right? What would happen if I separated you from your brother and said you can never talk to him again?
Yeah.
Would be part of you that would essentially be lost and die, right? And this is what you're telling. You no longer can communicate with each other. You can no longer share any information. You can no longer provide a buffer, right? You can't create resiliency anymore.
Oh,
Humans are a social organism, and so are mitochondria. And so I think when our assay looks at the social connectedness that these mitochondria have, and I think it's really important to resiliency and disease adaptation. One of the things we've seen across the platform in this is most people have dysfunctional mitochondrial structure that starts at this level. A lot of people are supplementing in the wrong way, right? They're feeding their mitochondria raw resources to get them to rev and generate. But if you don't have the structure, you can
actually,
rev the mitochondria as much as you want. All they're going to do is make free radicals, right? They're not going to make energy. And so
wow.
our test gives people an assessment of where they need to start with their therapy, which is, I think,
So
really cool.
this makes finally it makes sense why, I've said many times an athlete can actually oxidize and age much faster than a couch potato eating Doritos, right?
Yeah.
Because if that mitochondrial machinery is not firing properly, and now you're putting yourself sort of in a hypoxic state for long periods of times on a consistent basis for
Yeah.
years,
Yep.
you're just a free radical producing machine,
You are.
right? An energy machine. You're actually destroying your health.
Yeah.
Which is why I would say a lot of long distance runners or endurance athlete, you see this in them.
Yeah. I mean, I was in Bethesda many years ago at a grant review, and I was at a bookstore because I had a couple hours to kill before my flight, and I found this book, and someone I wish I could remember the title of it, but the gist of it was they'd actually done the calculation of how long you live if you exercise in terms of longevity you add to your lifetime versus if you just sit on a couch and you've gained all that time, right? So you have to think about time in a unique kind of way. When you're exercising, that's time that's lost because you're spending all of that time pumping and doing stuff to your body. During that time, you're also creating a lot of stress in your body, free radicals, your heart's pumping higher, your heart rate goes up. And I think the calculus was that you gain maybe 2 years at the end of the day. So the question becomes, don't you want to just sit on your ass and do nothing and live well for that entire time rather than get 2 years out of exercising a couple hours every day of your life, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, it's a balance.
I mean, I like to get, and tell me if I'm off here, but to give the audience an idea of the complexity of mitochondria,
Yeah.
it represents basically 10% of our body weight, yet it produces 95% of all our energy. And to give you a number, the average amount of mitochondria in our bodies per cell can vary between like 500 to 2,000, and your heart up to 10,000, and the retina of your eye up to 50,000. And then we have approximately 40 trillion cells. I mean, you make the math.
Yeah.
That's a lot of
Billions,
energy we need to be
billions of
producing.
mitochondria. Yeah, I
Right.
mean, it's crazy. Like your heart generates kilograms of ATP a day, but you don't gain 4 kilograms in mass, right? Because you're constantly burning it. It's basically generated and it's gone. Four
Right.
kilograms.
That's
Well,
incredible. That's incredible.
if
I mean,
there's
I like to say on the working out, to me, it's therapy. So I'm happy you're
It
working out.
is. I mean, I'm not saying don't work out, but but what I think this test will do is there a better way to work out where you're not exhausting your systems and you're actually replenishing them and regenerating them, right?
Yeah. And you know what? It's funny that you say that because prior to us taking this test, we actually found a new training regimen where we're literally in the gym maybe 25, 30 minutes at most, and our load is significantly less. Now, my results and his results have been amazing. And obviously, we're doing it right because our mitochondria tests are pretty cool. We're not that far off. There is some room for adjustments for sure. So I think this completely correlates with what you're saying.
Yeah.
The training is based on a NASA training. It was actually based for NASA people. It's based on your breath. So you take 3 breaths, you do 5 reps with 1 breath up and down on the concentric and eccentric. Then you take 4 breaths, you repeat 4 repetitions, but with 2 breaths on the concentric and eccentric. You take a 5 breath break, and then you repeat 3 repetitions with 5 breath up and 5 breath down. And by the time you're done, you fatigue every single face of the muscle without having to raise your heart rate to a ridiculous amount of.
Doc, it looks funny as hell because you'll get these like beef heads that are there pumping 245 pounds. I'm shaking with 15-pound dumbbells. Like,
Also, think about what you're doing, right? The breathing is changing your oxygen dynamic, and oxygen is what your mitochondria are using as a fuel source. So
Yeah.
you're essentially creating this positive stressor using oxygen and mitochondria in your system, which is
makes sense. That makes a lot of
interesting to
sense.
see. And we got to retest you and see where you end up.
Well, if there's no more questions, what I would like to do, guys, is end it here, and then we'll continue with another video to go over our results so you guys have an idea of what they look like and what could be discussed about them. So when you do get your results from us, you have a better idea on how to read them, and then obviously we can get on the phone with you guys and go over them to better explain the results.
And also for the viewer, it's just that, we're doing this so that you understand. Listen, there's a lot of value in getting a professor from a university to tell you that it's bullshit. So, this is precision. Like, you want to make sure what your mitochondria are doing so that you can supplement according to that, because everybody's wildly different. So we'll see you on the next one.
All right, perfect.
God bless.